The late Republican age of the United States had seen the country transformed, interconnected in ways unimaginable during the decentralized democratic era. Rails and roads now extended across the industrialized nation, and American factories soon surpassed even those of the British Empire in their manufacturing output. The United States was growing rapidly, the empty corners of the map filled out, and the final clashes with native tribes would come and go. It was only a matter of time before this influence seeped beyond the country's borders. An expedition was launched against Korea in 1871. Hawaii was held as an essential protectorate, being officially annexed in 1898. Spain was expelled from the Caribbean that same year, and the territories of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines were annexed soon after. Closing out the century was the United States' participation in the Eight-Nation expedition against China during the Boxer Rebellion. The United States was becoming more than just a land empire. It very well appeared to be teetering on the verge of becoming a colonial empire much like Britain or France, though of course, it didn't. The United States, despite increasing opportunities in the aftermath of the Civil War, limited its efforts at colonial expansion beyond its continental borders. But what if that changed? What if in an alternate timeline, the United States became a colonial empire? Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another alternate history scenario for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who's donated to us on Patreon, Utreon, and right here on YouTube through channel memberships. Your donations really go a long way to keeping this channel going, and by donating to us across any of these platforms, you'll get access to some great perks including physical merch, a custom designed flag wallpaper, and access to an exclusive members-only Discord server where you can enter your scenarios for a chance to have them made into full videos. You can follow the pop-up on screen here, go to the comment section or description to visit any of these pages and support our channel, and of course you can do so by clicking the join button right below this video. If you can't donate anything, consider subscribing and sharing this video to help the channel out. Now, back to the video. The United States in the wake of the Civil War was in a precarious state, with a weakened economy and fears that the country would fall into war once again, so it's understandable why hesitation to expansion existed, but it didn't exist alone. It would only be 2 years after General Lee's surrender that the Alaska Purchase would go through, with the intention of this new acquisition serving as both a realm from which to project more influence into the Pacific and a land from which to extract valuable resources that could make the United States all the wealthier. Perhaps in this alternate timeline in the aftermath of the Civil War, much as with internal developments, the United States decides that it must pursue external expansion to acquire the resources and reach necessary to fully recover. Essentially, the decision is made then and there that the United States will acquire colonies. Perhaps one of the earliest opportunities in the aftermath of the Civil War was Lincoln's plan to acquire a territory within the Caribbean or Central America to establish a colony for freed slaves. The planned colony would have been located either in Haiti, the Yucatan, British Honduras, or Panama, with Liberia excluded because of cost and logistical issues. Though it's unlikely the radical Republicans would have supported such a measure, abolitionists having long supported integration over colonization, for the sake of this scenario we'll suppose that Congress carries through the plan and the location of choice would be Haiti. The Haitians had been undergoing a long period of political instability by this point in time, and in 1867, 1869, and 1874 would see their presidents overthrown in domestic power struggles. In this alternate timeline, the United States would seize the opportunity to back a Haitian president who would willingly accept the incoming freeman population and serve as a proxy for the US in a way similar to Batista in Cuba several years later. This Caribbean protectorate would be a valuable resource for tropical sugar and coffee production and give the United States a strategic hold in the Greater Antilles. As the freeman population slowly colonized Haiti, growing into a majority and establishing institutions reminiscent of those in the American states, Haiti would see annexation as a territory and perhaps eventually achieve statehood. Rebellions by the native francophone Haitians would likely erupt over the years, but see continued suppression by the United States and the freeman population, who would dominate elite positions established by the proxy president. This project would also see the American Colonization Society receive a surge of funding from the federal government, what little it could spare at the time, making it far more effective at facilitating additional colonization efforts. It should also be remembered that in the aftermath of the Civil War, the radical Republicans had sought to hold Britain accountable for its attempt to support the Confederacy by demanding either $2 billion in reparations or the entire western coast of Canada, allowing the US to link the continental states with the newly acquired territory of Alaska. This had gone as far as to have a bill proposed by Congress in 1866 which would have authorized the president to annex not part of, but all of Canada, a bill the following year calling for the Western Territories exclusively. For the sake of this scenario, we'll assume the latter bill goes into effect, as the underpopulated and underdeveloped Canadian West would have been of little value to Britain and was a territory exceedingly difficult for Britain to effectively defend from the US, who possessed a far larger population right along the border, making it an ideal territory for the US to seize by force, and leaving Britain little response beyond declaring an all-out war, which simply would not be worth it, especially when dynamics in continental Europe were quickly changing. The US also wouldn't be eager to go to war, especially given that it was still largely recovering from the Civil War, but given the circumstances before it, the US would conclude that Britain would be in no position to realistically challenge such a request and successfully force a concession of British Columbia and the Northwest Territory. The expedition against Korea would take on a more relentless character. In our timeline, US forces withdrew following a refusal from Korea to return to the negotiating table and a reinforcing of Korean defenses. Some years later, Japan would manage to exert its influence over Korea by coaxing it into a trade alliance at threat of bombardment. Determined to bring Korea under American influence, an increased show of force may have proven sufficient to lock Korea into an exclusive trade and military alliance, turning the kingdom into a protectorate of the US, much to the displeasure of Japan. Another colonial opportunity would present itself in the follow-up to the 1867 Formosa expedition, which ended in failure for the United States, but which the Japanese fulfilled by suppressing the hostile natives of the island and occupying southern Taiwan in 1874. Had the United States pressed the issue and regrouped with greater strength, Taiwan, or rather Formosa, may have become a colony as well, though this would almost certainly spell retaliation from the Qing dynasty, which officially ruled the island. Much as in the case of Japan's expedition, the Qing dynasty may simply agree to compensate the United States for the rover incident which initiated the first expedition, as well as any further clashes with the hostile natives, leading the US to withdraw from Formosa, but once again irritating Japan, who would recognize this as the United States encroaching upon its own colonial ambitions. This may result in an early Japanese-American war well before Japan was fully modernized, crippling them as a great power and ensuring that the United States would become the master of the Pacific. Of course, the Berlin Conference would also see the United States take on a more active role in the partitioning of Africa. In our timeline, the US was invited to the conference and did send representatives, but left without claiming any territories. This time around, the United States may reassert its claims to Liberia, which had been independent up until this point, along with greater inland territories rich in natural rubber and other resources. Hawaii would be pacified and annexed, Spain would be expelled from the Caribbean with Cuba remaining a US territory, and the Boxer Rebellion may give the United States the just cause necessary to finally annex Formosa, claiming it as a necessary outpost to keep China in check. The United States would exit the century far more powerful than it had been in our world, and with increased interests in both the Caribbean and the Pacific, emphasis on the development of a powerful American navy would lead the country's naval might to eventually rival that of Britain. America's relations with Russia would become more strained by the US's assumption of Japan's role in the Pacific, and challenging of Russia's own expansion in the region left the two on less amicable terms. However, unlike in the case of Japan and the Russo-Japanese War of our timeline, no war would break out between the US and Russia, as the Russians would not underestimate American capabilities as they had Japan's. Britain would remain standoffish toward the United States, both on account of their seizing of Canadian territory and their threatening naval might. However, this still would not mean that alliance between the two countries was entirely off the table. This century would open the door to several new colonial opportunities for the United States, but also opportunities for greater conflict with much stronger powers. The Venezuelan crisis of 1902, the Mexican-American border war, the occupations of Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic, to name a few. Not even mentioning the Great War and how wildly different the final borders of the world may look if the war was won not with the help of a United States determined to promote national sovereignty and peace, but an aggressive United States eager to extract valuable territories from the defeated powers. But what do you think? What might have happened had the United States become a colonial power? Let us know in the comments below. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Mr. Z, out.